Something big is stirring in the world of the Las Vegas Raiders. Yesterday, quarterback Shedeur Sanders posted an intriguing image on Instagram that sent fans into a frenzy. In the photo, he was standing right next to none other than current Raiders quarterback Gino Smith. This instantly sparked speculation. Could Shedeur Sanders be the next quarterback for the Silver and Black? Now, before we dive into the details, take a second to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and don't forget to press the bell icon so you never miss the latest updates on the Las Vegas Raiders. Let's get into it. The photo got people wondering, is Gino Smith already working behind the scenes to bring in Sanders as his successor? It's not a wild idea. Many experts compare Shedeur Sanders to Gino Smith. Both are talented quarterbacks who may not be the most explosive runners, but have just enough mobility to escape pressure and extend plays. Sanders is still developing, and his best football is ahead of him, much like Smith when he first entered the NFL. Now, here's where things get even more interesting. The photo was taken in Miami, Florida, and that raises a big question. Has Gino Smith even been in Vegas yet? Despite being traded to the Raiders, there hasn't been an official press conference introducing him. Could it be that Smith is still in Florida, working out and preparing for the season? A few weeks ago, he was spotted training with top NFL players like Stefon Diggs and CeeDee Lamb. And then there's the money factor. Yesterday was a key deadline for Smith. He was due a $16 million roster bonus, and the Raiders had to pay up. However, they could still roll that money into a bigger extension, meaning the team might be planning something significant. So, what does all of this mean for the Raiders' future? Could Shedeur Sanders be a legitimate option for the team? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned for more updates. Gino Smith's contract situation. What's really going on? You'd expect a team owner like Mark Davis to handle things quickly, especially when $16 million is on the line. But here's the big question. Why hasn't Gino Smith's contract extension been finalized yet? Let's break it down. Gino Smith was traded from the Seahawks to the Raiders because he wanted a new contract. The Raiders agreed to pay him, but as of now, the deal still isn't done. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Smith is still in Florida. He hasn't been to Vegas, hasn't made an official appearance, and hasn't signed that extension yet. Now, make no mistake, Smith is getting paid. The Raiders have already handed him a $16 million roster bonus, and an extension is coming. But what's taking so long? If for some reason the deal falls apart, the Raiders would be stuck paying him that $16 million without securing him long-term. That's why fans are starting to ask, could this situation open the door for Shedeur Sanders? Now, let's talk about Shedeur. Just a few months ago, he was seen as a top draft pick, but his stock has taken a serious hit. Why? Well, he skipped key pre-draft events. He didn't throw at the East-West Shrine game, he didn't participate in the Combine, and that raised eyebrows. For a quarterback who isn't locked in as a top pick, every opportunity to showcase talent matters. So, here's the big question. Should the Raiders consider Shedeur Sanders as their next quarterback? Could he be the future of the franchise if things with Gino Smith don't go as planned? This situation is far from settled, and the next few weeks will be critical. What do you think? Should the Raiders stick with Gino Smith, or should they look ahead to the next big thing? Should the Raiders really draft a quarterback? It's easy to see why Shedeur Sanders chose to skip certain pre-draft events. Skipping the East-West Shrine game and not throwing at the NFL Combine might seem like small decisions, but they've had a big impact on his draft stock. Just look at what happened with guys like Bo Nix and Josh Allen. They played in showcase games, impressed scouts, and secured top draft spots. Sanders? He missed those chances, and now there's real doubt about where he'll land. Some experts even believe he might not be a top 10 pick anymore. There's talk that quarterbacks like Jackson Dart could even go ahead of him. Analysts like Mel Kiper, Adam Schefter, and Todd McShay have all pointed out that Sanders' stock is dropping fast. So, if the Raiders have the 6th overall pick, does it make sense for them to take a quarterback? Probably not. The Raiders already have Gino Smith, and they're about to pay him around $40 million per year. If they draft Shedeur Sanders, the moment Smith throws an interception, fans will start chanting for the rookie to take over. That's a dangerous situation, because instead of focusing on winning now, the team would always be thinking about the future. Instead of taking a quarterback, the Raiders need to build a stronger team around Gino Smith. Just look at last year. Drafting Brock Bowers and Paris Johnson Jr. made an instant impact. Bowers quickly became one of the team's best pass catchers, and Johnson turned into a top-tier offensive lineman. If the Raiders want to compete, they should focus on adding another top wide receiver, a dominant defensive lineman, or a shutdown cornerback. At the end of the day, the Raiders have a big decision to make. Do they chase the quarterback of the future, or do they stack the roster with talent and try to win now? What do you think? Should the Raiders draft Shedeur Sanders, or should they use that pick to strengthen the team around Gino Smith? Should the Raiders go all in? The Raiders have a big decision to make. They've committed to Gino Smith, and that means one thing. They need to go all in for the next 2 to 3 years. Let's be real. Smith hasn't proven he's a Super Bowl-winning quarterback, and history shows that going all in on veteran QBs is a gamble. Just look at what happened to the Jets with Aaron Rodgers, the Falcons with Kirk Cousins, and the Saints with Derek Carr. None of those moves worked out. But, on the other hand, teams like the Buccaneers with Tom Brady and the Broncos with Peyton Manning went all in, and they won Super Bowls. So, will Gino Smith follow that path? That's the big question. If the Raiders wanted to rebuild, they should have traded Max Crosby for draft picks and started fresh with a rookie QB, but that's not what they chose to do. Instead, they're rolling with Gino. That means they need to surround him with the best possible talent. And speaking of talent, let's talk about free agency. Raiders, free agency moves. Who's in, who's out? The Raiders have been busy this offseason, making moves to strengthen the roster. Some players left, some were re-signed, and some new faces joined the team. While big names grab headlines, a lot of fans overlook the under-the-radar signings that could have a real impact. Let's break it down. Key players re-signed. Malcolm Kuntz, edge rusher. A solid pass rusher who's getting better every season. Adam Butler, defensive lineman. A veteran presence on the defensive front. Matthew Butler, defensive tackle. A player with a ton of potential but hasn't fully developed yet. Now, Matthew Butler is an interesting case. He was a fifth-round pick out of Tennessee, and while his first few years in the NFL weren't great, his final year in college showed huge potential. That's why the Raiders are giving him another shot. He's only 26 years old, and if he can put it all together, he could turn into a key contributor on the defensive line. And the best part? The Raiders are betting on him with a low-risk contract, around $1.03 million. That's a smart move. If he doesn't pan out, no big loss. But if he finally breaks out, it's a huge win for the team. Now, the real question is, what's next for the Raiders? They've kept some familiar faces, but will that be enough to compete in a stacked AFC? What do you think? Should the Raiders keep investing in veteran players, or should they start planning for the future? Raiders' new faces. Who's ready to shine? The Raiders have been making some smart, low-risk moves this offseason, adding players with big potential at bargain prices. It's a classic high-upside, low-cost strategy, and it could pay off in a big way. One player to watch is Lonnie Johnson Jr., a versatile safety cornerback coming over from the Panthers. Injuries have slowed him down, but when healthy, he has flashed playmaking ability. He's tall, physical, and has experience playing both safety and slot corner, which gives the Raiders options. His contract is likely in the $2 to $3 million range, which means the team isn't taking a huge financial risk. If he stays healthy, he could surprise a lot of people this season. But the biggest gamble with the highest potential reward, that would be Eric Stokes. Eric Stokes, a comeback story in the making. Just a few years ago, Eric Stokes was a first-round pick for the Green Bay Packers. His first 2 seasons, outstanding. He looked like a future star. Then, the Packers changed their defensive system, and things fell apart for him. His development stalled, and suddenly he was on the outside looking in. Now, the Raiders are giving him a second chance, and this could be huge. The Raiders' defensive coordinator, Patrick Graham, has a reputation for turning struggling defensive backs into solid contributors. He runs a complex, unpredictable scheme that confuses quarterbacks and puts defensive backs in a position to make plays. Stokes has the talent, no question about it. The only thing that needs to happen? He has to find his confidence again. If he does, the Raiders might have just landed a starting-caliber cornerback for only $4.5 million, a steal in today's NFL. Right now, Jack Jones and Jacorian Bennett are expected to start at corner, but with injuries, competition, and unexpected performances, things can change quickly. Stokes will have a real shot at earning playing time, and maybe even taking over as a starter. The Raiders aren't just making random signings. They're building a roster full of players with something to prove. And if just a few of these guys live up to their potential, this defense could shock a lot of people this season. What do you think? Will these signings pay off, or is it just wishful thinking? The Raiders' bold moves. Game changers, or just placeholders? The Raiders have been making some interesting moves this offseason, and one name that stands out is Elandon Roberts. If you've watched this guy play, you know he's a hitter, a tough, no-nonsense linebacker who thrives against the run. Some people might compare him to Robert Spillane. Both played for the Steelers, both are physical linebackers, but that's too easy of a comparison. Roberts is older, more experienced, and brings a different kind of energy to the field. But the real question is, how will the Raiders use him? There are signs that Patrick Graham's defense could look a little different this season. More aggressive, more physical, maybe even bringing in some elements from Pete Carroll's defensive philosophy. More stacked boxes, more emphasis on shutting down the run early. That's where Roberts fits in. He's a tone setter, the kind of guy who sets the intensity for the entire defense. Will he be great in coverage? Probably not. But his job isn't to cover deep routes, it's to shut down the run, bring the physicality, and lead the defense with experience. And at just $3 million, this is a smart, low-risk signing for the Raiders. Jeremy Chinn, a key piece or a misfit? The biggest defensive addition, though, is Jeremy Chinn. The Raiders are giving him $8 million a year, which tells you they see him as a key part of this defense. But here's the twist. Is he actually going to play safety, or is he a linebacker? Last season, Chinn spent more time closer to the line of scrimmage, almost playing like an extra linebacker. He's not the fastest in coverage, and if the Raiders use him as a deep safety, they could struggle against the pass. But if they use him correctly, as a hybrid safety linebacker who can attack the run, blitz, and cover tight ends, then this could be a sneaky good pickup. There's also another angle here. Chinn could be a mentor to Isaiah Pola-Mao. Both have a similar play style, and if Chinn helps develop Pola-Mao into a long-term defensive piece, this signing could have even more value. Alex Kappa, solid or just a stopgap? On the offensive side, the Raiders added Alex Kappa, a starting guard from the Bengals, but here's the thing. Is he really the answer? Kappa is smart, experienced, and reliable, but when you go up against elite defensive linemen like Chris Jones, you need more than just reliability. You need someone who can hold their ground in the biggest moments. This feels like a short-term solution rather than a long-term investment. The Raiders haven't put enough resources into the interior offensive line, and if they're serious about protecting their quarterback, they might need a better plan than just plugging in veterans for a year or two. The verdict? The Raiders are making moves that prioritize toughness and experience, but the success of these signings depends on how well they fit into the system. If Elandon Roberts brings that run-stuffing energy, if Jeremy Chinn finds the right role, and if Alex Kappa holds up in key moments, this could be a quietly solid offseason. But if these players don't fit, the Raiders could still have some major holes to fill. What do you think? Will these signings make an impact, or are they just temporary fixes?